Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this evening's conversation around what is ETOD, equitable transportation oriented development. All right, I'm joined tonight with Katanya Raby, policy advisor for the mayor's office. I'm with Miss Yvonne Shields, board member for the Foundation for Homan Square, and Melvin Thompson, equity director of the Endeleo Institute. All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
All right, Katanya, tell us what ETOD is. Why should we care? Why does it matter? Why is it important to Chicagoans?
Yeah, happy to share about ETOD. I'm going to actually start with the definition of what TOD means, just because TOD has been around in the city a little bit longer. And so TOD is transit-oriented development, and it's a type of community development that includes a mixture of housing, office, retail, other commercial development and amenities that are integrated into a walkable neighborhood and located within a half-mile radius of quality public transportation. So unlike auto-oriented development, TOD prioritizes people and transit access over cars and parking and roads. So taking that concept of development, ETOD, you can go to the next slide. ETOD is, really thinking about how do we make these opportunities for development equitable across the entire city. And I'm going to go into a little bit more about what that means in the next couple of slides. But before we go into that, most of us live in our community because there's something about it that we love. There's something that draws us in. Some of us have, communities where the L line runs through, and some of us have really great bus access, but that's not across equal or equitable across the entire city. And so the ETOD policy plan really takes a look at that and offers some recommendations on how we can make transit more equitable across the city. So let's go to the next slide. And so like I was saying, ETOD, it advocates that people of all incomes experience the benefit of dense, mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented development near transit hubs. And it matters because preferences for urban living are increasing, and the demand for housing and commercial development near train stations. And so we want to, figure out how we can make this mix work. It also matters because it helps to, think about what the things that we're currently facing. We're thinking about climate change, and so having transit allows us to not have so many cars on the road. We're also facing racial injustice and access to, different opportunities. We're looking at public health and looking at jobs and the economy. So ETOD kind of covers a lot of those areas. Go to the next slide. So I just want to quickly say what isn't ETOD. So right now, and I know Melvin is going to, share a bit more about 95th Street, but I just want to quickly say that the 95th Street Red Line station is a beautiful new station that has been put on, or renovated station, multi-million-dollar project that is absolutely lovely. There's no development happening in that half-mile radius around the station. And then when you take a look on the north side, there's a lot of development happening along the Blue Line station and the Brown Line, but it's not considered equitable. So that's the issue. That's the thing. There is TOD happening, but it's not equitable because these are areas where there's high rent. It's kind of appealing to more affluent folks that are moving into those areas. We go to the next slide. So where is ETOD and where it isn't? So this map on the left really illustrates how many projects over the last 7 years have been developed using the TOD zoning code. And so there's been over 220 projects that have been developed in this time frame. But the majority of those projects have occurred on the north and the northwest side. And that's why we are really wanting to make sure that we're using this opportunity to bring some of that development to other areas of the city, which is the west side and the south side. And then if you look at the image on the right, it just kind of illustrates how just sharing this number of 90%, that's a huge number. 90% of TOD projects took place on the north and northwest sides and in the loop. And so there's, that 10% is what was left over for the south and west sides, which are huge swaths of the city. You can go to the next one. So what does ETOD look like? Densely populated communities, where you don't need a car to get around. You're able to walk to work. You're able to walk to the store, to other amenities. There's also green space and public art and, bike paths and walk paths. And then also accessible for those with disabilities. It's also affordable housing and mixed use development, thinking about, open public space and, locally owned businesses, and also making sure that we are amplifying, the voices and the needs of those who are in Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. Households where there's TOD happening, where there's transit access, have 1.73 times more jobs than households in areas that don't have TOD activity. So if you're thinking about access to jobs, ETOD definitely really pushes us in that direction. And so if the folks in those areas that have TOD right now are having this 1.73 times more jobs, we need to distribute that more equitably. So that's the work that we're doing here with this plan. You can go to the next slide. So this is a timeline of where we are in this process. This has been a labor of love for over 18 months. Back in January of 2019, the new TOD ordinance was passed with advocacy by Elevated Chicago. They've been an amazing champion for ETOD throughout this process. And then, of course, Mayor Lightfoot was elected in April of 2019, and shortly after her election, coming into her position as mayor, the ETOD policy was included in the transition report, which is really, really important to note that she was already really pushing to make sure that this was a highlighted initiative in her administration. Fast forward to, over the time, we have several working groups coming together, over 80 stakeholders, from a multitude of organizations that came together to build out the structure for this policy plan. We held 2 virtual workshops this spring. We were trying to figure out how we're going to make things happen, and COVID kind of hit us, everyone, and we're all sideways with that, but we figured it out, and we had some really amazing workshops that helped us to develop this plan and put it out. Now it's out for public comment for the next, how many days? Don't get my math wrong, but it's on October 29th is when the public comment period ends, and so we invite everyone to take part in that. And then moving forward, we're hoping that we can use these recommendations to really start thinking about how we can implement some short-term priorities and think about how we can, get some more funding so that we can move forward with, actually making some breaking some ground here with these projects. And we've already been getting a lot of support from the Chicago Community Trust and the Partners for Places. We've received grants from them, so we're well on our way to making this a reality. You can go to the next slide. Just real quick, the highlights of the ETOD plan. These are the recommendation areas that we've identified, through our work with the various stakeholders that we've connected with over the last few months. And one of the big buckets is to build the city's capacity to support ETOD. So that includes having dedicated staff, formalizing working groups, having an annual ETOD performance report, and community engagement, setting community engagement, because that's very important in this process. The next bucket is to make sure that ETOD is required, easier, and more equitable. So, having an overlay zoning district, providing extra points for ETOD and funding programs, developing more pedestrian infrastructure, and also more affordability and accessibility. And then the third bucket is embedding ETOD principles into Chicago's citywide planning process. So if you're not aware, the city of Chicago is underway with a citywide planning process that will take about 3 years to complete. But ETOD plays a very important role in that. And we want to make sure that, through this work, we're looking at racial and health assessments of land use, thinking about the framework for neighborhood land use, and then also prioritizing transportation. So what went into creating this policy plan? Oh my goodness, it was a lot of patience, a lot of balance, thinking about how we can connect with as many local partners as we could. Transparency was very important, mayoral allies, national partners, very important to have equity. And I just want to add another term, love. We did this out of love. There was a lot of love in this process. And so it was, a wonderful thing to do together, and we're all looking forward to continuing this process with communities across the entire city over the next few years. We can go to the next slide. So what can you do to contribute? So right now, like I said earlier, this is our open public comment period, and so we want to make sure that we give Chicagoans the opportunity to give feedback on this plan. It is up live on our website right now, so go to chi.gov/ETOD to read the plan. Also, you can share your support or submit questions or comments. You can email us, etod@cityofchicago.org. Myself and a couple of colleagues, we check that email address regularly, so we'll definitely want to be in communication with you on that. You can also leave a message at our hotline, voicemail, not really a hotline, a voicemail, 312-744-1400. And then also post online on social media, reshare our post at #ETOD. We have a lot of communication via social media on all of social media platforms. Also ask your neighbors, your local business owners, coworkers, and everybody else that you know to participate in the conversation around this plan. It's really important that we get all of Chicago involved. And I think that's it.
Katanya, this is incredible. Will you just let us know? I know you said it's been a labor of love, and it's evident that it has been. Who's all been a part of this working group?
So yeah, we've had, well over 80 people that have, 80 organizations that have been involved. So these organizations include, community groups, nonprofits, transportation professionals, city agencies, including PDOT and PDPH and DPD and DOH. And I know I'm saying a lot of acronyms, I'm saying the alphabet too, but there's been, a tremendous amount of support around this. And, so groups like, Melvin, Melvin's group with Endeleo, and then there's also the community partners that Elevated has continuously worked with over this time, those who have the community tables around the station. So it's amazing how many groups have been involved and, have been so genuine in just giving all kinds of feedback, whether or not it's pretty or not. And it's just been a wonderful experience.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. I have to welcome, before we get into our questions for our panelists, I have to welcome the Equitable Development Coordinator for Logan Square Neighborhood Association, Gary Jimenez. Gary, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me today.
Of course.
Pleasure.
Of course. So this question is for all of the panelists. Feel free to chime in at any point. Is TOD present in your community? And if so, what does it look like?
Well, for the Homan Square area, and what we're doing is for the Blue Line on Kedzie Homan, they share that transit station. And Homan Square, the foundation for Homan Square is we're in the process of getting affordable housing on Homan. We would like to do a gateway as you're getting off that transit stop. We're also doing crosswalks, the area around that transit area, but mainly we're looking at affordable housing, which is already there. There are a lot of vacant lots. We're going to put 40 to 50 units of affordable housing in that area. So we're in the process of doing it on the Kedzie side of the blue line. We're looking at a pop-up placement. So we're doing that. We're looking at the housing part of it, and also Homan Square and IFF are looking at a retail new construction right at that transit stop across the street. So what we want to do is to keep that affordable housing that's already there, build some more affordable housing, because we don't want displacement. So many people have left North Lawndale for various reasons. So we want to make it better for the residents that are here and that have stayed here, and to encourage people to come, but with affordable housing.
Sure, thank you. Gary or Melvin?
Sure. It does not exist TOD or ETOD at the 95th Street station, as you might guess. The upside to that is it's a blank canvas. There are plenty of development opportunities in and around that station. And for two reasons, we're really excited about it. One, because it's a gateway for our corridor development, which is part of the mission at the Endeleo Institute to revitalize that 95th Street corridor, and to have this record $300 million station plop right into the middle of our corridor is a beacon for us. And so certainly we want to see that happen. But also, we're actually ground zero at 95th Street for the Red Line extension, you know, that has been much talked about for years, the extension from 95th to 130th, which is, you know, looking more and more likely these days. I mean, that's a $2.3 billion extension. And what better than to create a model for what those 4 new stations could look like at 95th Street. So we've, you know, our reasons are twofold for seeing this kind of, you know, transit-oriented development at 95th Street. So we're excited.
That's awesome. Thank you, Melvin. Gary, did you have anything?
Yeah. So I guess adding on, or like similar to a lot of people who have spoke so far, we at Logan Square Neighborhood Association have began to see ETOD in our neighborhood, specifically in Logan Square. It's no secret that Logan Square has changed throughout the years very drastically. One of the biggest things I know as a Mexican is that there's no longer the area right there on Milwaukee where you can just go and have you know, fun with your family and stuff. There's lots of bars coming in. It's very much changing. But I think with the Emmett Street housing, we're beginning to see a change in ETOD. We're beginning to see families that may be able to come back in through affordable housing. It was a huge victory for us at LSNA to hear that Emmett Street was going to be 100% affordable housing. So we are very, very excited. And I think this was like a perfect opportunity to show that there can be ETOD in our neighborhoods, and there should be. And we just proved that, you know, that how we say in Spanish, si se puede, like, yes, you can, or yes, we can. So it's very nice.
Yeah. And Jameer, if I might add, the question of, is it, you know, is your area ETOD or not. The bigger question is why it isn't. And I think what Katanya, alluded to earlier was the 2013 ordinance for TOD didn't happen naturally on the south and west side. There was no intentionality, and I think that's what ETOD brings, the intentionality to make sure, because we know what the cost of segregation is to the entire city, and so it behooves the city to have that equitable development at every station. And so, it just didn't happen naturally, and so this kind of pushes the envelope a bit.
And I think that the west side, the south side, when you look at what happened around the other areas, north and west of us, and how their infrastructure and everything was done for them, and how we were left out. So this is important. It's great that we have the opportunity to, as Melvin said, create on this blank canvas and to do it right for our residents.
I just have to take a step back and just recognize something that you called out, Melvin. In the south and west sides not being considered in 2013, and now we have this consideration, these great opportunities for development. I think it's a testament to really recognizing where, in planning and development, this is where we went wrong, but this is how we need to get it right. And these are the folks we need to invite into that process. I was explaining to a young woman not long ago about what the policy means. And I simply said, what are your thoughts around the way the train system runs? Well, we could really use, more safety, or it being patrolled a little bit more, and so on and so forth. And so I think, as I'm understanding the comment period, you all are looking for the suggestions that Chicagoans have around this policy. What do you think the policy plan means for South and West Siders in their quality of life?
Well, I'll just jump in and say, this process, and I was fortunate to be, privileged to be a part of the working group that put this plan together, this policy together, and through it, a whole new area of respect for policy, period. And I think in our communities, we don't understand the weight and the value of what policy actually means, and how I was received as a community-based organization, how they how this working group showed deference to a community-based organization in terms of the suggestions and the recommendations. That was amazing. And then it really dawned on me that this political or this policy work actually leads to economic development, right? So policy and economics are adjoined. So this is how you get your area developed, by having a hand and a say in policy.
Anybody want to add to that?
I wasn't on the working group, but that's what is needed, is that policy to be there. That's so it can be enacted upon, so those actions can be taken, and to have the community and the community groups there to say, hey, this is what we need. For the people in my community, the quality of life would be so much better just with a well-lit, bright transit station. Mm-hmm. You don't realize when you're going into gloom and doom every day how it affects you. And just having some of your art or people from your community doing that transit station, having markings on the street. You don't realize those things that you don't have that affect your quality of life until it gets better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have to say, I have really enjoyed the murals that we've seen across the city, since all the civil unrest. Certainly don't appreciate, the circumstances leading up to it, but to see the way that we are bouncing back collectively is really, inspiring. Community voice is a major part of this. Why should South and West Siders participate in the comment period?
Oh man, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but that's, I mean, that's, it just alludes, it just goes back to what I said earlier about your voice. You know, as a community person, you know, talking to planning officials, transit people, policy people like Katanya in the mayor's office, you don't get that opportunity every day to have your, you know, what you're feeling be expressed and valued. And that's what this comment period gives you. It gives you that voice. It gives you that opportunity, and you're going to be valued because no one has all of the answers. And so I think it's a, you know, I don't know, when is it, the 29th? I think people should really give it, it's not, you know, it's not really difficult to read. I mean, it's in English, so you can kind of discern and see where, you know, you can add. I'm sorry?
It's in English and 5 other languages.
And I meant that in a different way, that it wasn't, you know, a bunch of jargon, in other words.
I got you.
Yeah,
I got you.
but it is, I mean, and you will see areas that could be improved. And so we need that voice, because this isn't, you know, final, and it's going to be part of that, you know, that wider citywide plan is going to get folded into that. So here's our opportunity. I mean, in my lifetime, I don't remember, I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, and I just don't remember these kind of opportunities where city officials, you know, from the mayor's office and these kind of things are asking citizens, please comment, please give us your suggestions and recommendations. So that alone is impetus to do something and be a part of this.
You know, so you all are very close to this, and you know, we're coming up on 30 minutes into our conversation, so I feel like we're family. I can ask this realistically, because we have people, I mean, who have been a part of all sorts of work groups, focus groups, conversations, city meetings, planning meetings, and it becomes stale after a while when you bring your thoughts and ideas to the table and you see something change. So realistically, Katanya, how might their ideas be incorporated?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something that we are like really wanting to make sure that we're being intentional about throughout the entire process. We're looking at this as a, you know, a guide that is going to help us to continue to have engagement with community, you know, for many years to come around ETOD. And so we don't anticipate, the plan is not to develop this beautiful document and then have it sit on a shelf. Like that's, you know, that's old school planning. We're moving into a new space with, you know, making sure that we're having a constant feedback loop and more engagement and more opportunities for people to get involved. So, you know, even though the comment period ends on the 29th, that's really just so that we can finalize the document and have it ready to go to act as a guide. That does not mean that we're not going to continue to work towards implementation. Like I said earlier, our partners, Elevated Chicago, has really done a phenomenal job with engagement over the last 2 years. But we're going to continue working with them. And they have, you know, we've secured additional funding so that we can continue this work into the future. So the idea is to use this document as a guide. And, you know, as you know, life changes, you know, COVID came and hit us all and we didn't know what to do, but we figured it out, and who knows what's next. You know, we'll just have to continue to be nimble. And, you know, one thing I can appreciate about my colleagues at the city and, you know, also, you know, the other folks that are working on this project, we have been really able to like just stay on top of things and be ready to shift and change and make things work, you know, even when no one really knew what the outcome was going to be. And so we're going to continue that energy as we, you know, work on this work on developing more ETOD policy and in connecting our sister agencies and other city departments so that we can all, you know, work together on making this a strong initiative that will be folded into other areas of planning.
Great, thank you for that. So Melvin, as it relates to Elevated and eHub, tell us about your experience with ETOD and that process in your neighborhood.
Well, first and foremost, Elevated Chicago hooked me up. I mean, they put me on. They brought me to the table. You know, shout out to Roberto and Jackie Grimshaw for bringing me, you know, to this table and allowing me to have voice. I think the 95th Street station, where Elevated just celebrated, I think, their 3rd anniversary a few months ago. They celebrated that at the 95th Street station. And so we're really grateful to showcase, you know, the opportunities. I mean, there are 9 parcels that are adjacent to the Red Line station at 95th Street that the CTA owns. And we're looking to acquire that, to redevelop that area. Now imagine a station of this magnitude with 9 parcels, a full block to develop with all the things that our community says it needs, you know, a food hall, you know, retail, you name it, just all of those things within walking distance, a diner, a sit down, maybe a 24-hour restaurant, all of these things that we can place in that quarter-mile radius of that station is really exciting. And I got to tell you, Gary, I'm happier than you are for you all's achievement in Logan Square, because it gives us hope. You know, it's a shame that you got to fight for affordable housing that way, because it makes sense to keep people who are living in that community to stay there. But those are the structures that we know we have to, you know, somewhat dismantle in order to get those kind of things that we need in our community. So the thing about Washington Heights, which is the area that I work in, it's a solid community. Last year, we had a 2% uptick in population. Now, that might not sound like a whole lot, but just think about the well-documented exodus of African Americans from the city of Chicago to the South and Indiana and all these other places, and yet we're experiencing people actually moving into the community. And we have one of the highest home ownership rates in the entire city of Chicago. So we've got a lot of things going for us, right? And so development should be a natural thing, but it isn't. And so my job is to take that canvas and start painting some stuff so that we can start realizing and keeping the almost $200 million that is leaking out of our community. So, you know, that in a nutshell is what wakes me up and keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Melvin, thank you for that. I love that you're able to not just like give us insight into the process, but you also know the numbers and what impact those numbers have on our communities. You made mention of what's happening in Logan Square, and clearly if you know, you know. So Gary, there are those of us who don't know what's going on in Logan Square as it relates to Emmett Street. Could you fill us in?
Yeah, so like Melvin said, like, thank you for pointing it out. We at LSNA, one of the most common things we say is all children and people, regardless of race or income, deserve the opportunity to succeed in school and in life. And that means having a stable home. I mean, your home is where you start your day and you finish your day. So we believe everyone deserves a home, not only in the city of Chicago, but throughout the United States and the world. And so with this, if you are a longtime resident of Logan Square or even Chicago, you know that Logan Square has changed throughout the years drastically. There's a lot of development coming in. We at LSNA very commonly say it was a little too fast because it really drastically changed our communities. It separated families and made people forcefully move out, and that's a struggle. You know, that's a hit in the community. And we at LSNA decided to start working on a project that involved ETOD, and that was the Emmett Street project. So in October of 2018, LSNA organized a march that brought 500 people together at the Emmett Street parking lot for one reason, and that was for 100% affordable housing.
Wow.
So that was the main issue, yeah, because lots of people were moving out. So we needed something for the people in Logan Square to know that they were thinking about them and they belong to, they deserve to stay here. You know, they belong here. This is their neighborhood, regardless of what's happening in the neighborhood. And I know I speak for everyone when I say we have a responsibility in this neighborhood, and that's to ensure that the conditions for well-being are available to all in our society, not just some, not just the wealthy. Everyone deserves a home. And with the rents drastically increasing from, maybe the hundreds, like 800s, 900 to like $2,000 studios, we needed a place for people to be able to stay close to the Logan Square Blue Line so they can get to work, so they can just live in their neighborhoods as they did. And so through lots of hard work and through community organizing, that's what we got through the ETOD. And that was 100% affordable housing with the Emmett Street project. We were very, very happy when we found that out. Yeah, we were very excited. We took it as a very big victory because it was like, it just proved that, over money, over anything, people will prosper when we get together and we have a goal, not just for ourselves, but for each other. Because at the end of the day, it's a community and you want to be able to feel comfortable in your community. So it's definitely like a very big win.
So that's incredible. And to hear that story and hear how the community has band together, it sounds like that's the way the work group focused its efforts behind the scenes. Would you say that's accurate, Katanya?
Absolutely. It was, like I said, we brought together so many different minds from across so many different, communities across the city, and they all, really just, they didn't hold anything back. And Melvin will tell you, like, there was nothing held back about ideas and about, just really coming up with these innovative ways to make ETOD a really solid foundation for these communities. And, just hearing about Gary's work, what's happening with industry and all that, it's just like, I'm overjoyed to see it actually become a reality. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that these groups have done, a tremendous job with sharing their feedback, and not just feedback, but leading the way actually on all of these efforts.
That's incredible. So Ms. Yvonne, will you talk to us a little bit about, the ETOD process in your neighborhood as it relates to the walkability study?
Well, what we did was we got together with the School of the Art Institute, with the North Lawndale Community Coordinating Committee, the Department of Health, CLOC, let's see who else, CTA, and Elevated. We got together with all of those groups. We got a team together, and what they did was they went out and did a physical assessment of 22 intersections with adjacent sidewalks. You never think of, as you're walking, the things that are missing. So they collected the data, and the data allowed them to see and identify barriers to walking: crumbling sidewalks, missing signage, lighting, the whole spectrum of what makes people not walk. And you've got to walk to that transit station. So after that, then they did surveys at a number of community events. And from that, they made recommendations on what should happen on Homan and Harrison, more signage, because that's where the blue line is right at that intersection, to more signage, less crumbling streets, going down to the Kedzie part. That's where Homan Square, the foundation, is going to put up a pop-up placement. But that area, we could do streetscaping. We could do and make the streets wider. It's also a safe passage route that way. So And then the conclusion was that the things that the group saw and the improvements that needed to be made, they weren't new, they weren't different, they've happened on the other side of town. So there's a precedent for it, and those are things that came from that walkability study. So it, as I say, it's interesting as you're doing it, you're walking down the street, but when you do it with a different eye, you see the barriers to walking, which was an eye-opening experience for everybody.
You know, this is incredible because so often feedback is collected, you know, sometimes it sits on the shelf. People are a little tired of offering comments and whatnot, but listening to you all and your stories, it sounds like there's great benefit to participating in this comment period. Why is community input so important to this process?
Well, I'll just say, and it really goes to what Yvonne was just talking about. A couple of years ago, we got a what they call a priorities planning report from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, or CMAP.
Mhm.
And that process was really fulfilling because they did the same thing. They did walkability. They gave us data. Everything that I've said to you, I'm not smart at all. I got that from my planning report, right? That's what CMAP told us. So I use that almost like a weapon to move our communities forward, because you know the data matters and the research matters. And so when people comment and tell CMAP and told CMAP the things that they needed in our community, they didn't come from Melvin, they didn't come from Endeleo, they came from the collective of the community. And now I'm just following marching orders from that blueprint, that roadmap that we got. And so I would encourage any community-based organization, not just for, you know, the ETOD, but to go out and kind of recruit those planning organizations to do studies like they've done in North Lawndale and Washington Heights, because they have value. They have tremendous value, particularly when you're writing grants and people are asking you, well, where did you get all this data, right? And when you've gotten that from a regional planner, it really carries a lot of weight. So I think that's the other piece that actually coincides with ETOD now, because we've got a plan that didn't sit on the shelf, because I wasn't going to allow this thing to just sit there. Now that we knew what we needed and what the community wanted, we wanted to plan while doing. And that's what we're doing right now. And so ETOD is yet another tool for us to, you know, utilize to bring about the things that we need in our community.
Anybody else want to take that?
Yeah, if I could make a comment actually. So I think adding on to like what Melvin said, and this importance of why community members should be able to, you know, show interest or even be part of some kind of community process. I think one of the best, well, not best, but actually one of the most, one way at LSNA we've seen that would have been important, ETOD would have been important in terms of executing a plan, was in the Belmont Blue Line station. One of the things that we at LSNA noticed was that within the plan, there was no elevator for people who had wheelchairs. That accessibility for people, that's important, because not everyone can just walk downstairs or upstairs. And you know, that's one important aspect where through community process, you know, people could have expressed, you know, their own interests and said, hey, we need, you know, an elevator for people who are in wheelchairs or who just simply aren't able to use the stairs. That's like one really important aspect of, you know, where community process could have been really helpful.
Oh, I appreciate that.
That input is important. As you say, the ADA Act, you may be looking at something but you don't get the whole picture. But when the community has a voice and they feel they're empowered, and just like with the elevator, something happened as a result of someone saying something. So it's important that the community has a say.
Thank you for that. So this, I'm really looking forward to this response, because as at Public Narrative, we focus on how we're able to change the narrative. And we hear a lot of times people saying, we're changing the narrative, But what does that mean? And as I'm listening to you all, I hear the action and the intentionality behind actually changing narratives. So Katanya, what narrative or narratives were the ETOD working group hoping to address or establish with this policy?
Well, that's an excellent question. And there's so many narratives that have come out of this, just general, like being able to have conversations with so many different stakeholders, and even my own personal narrative in this, as I've, been, as a resident and someone who lives near transit, but is, kind of being priced out of the community that I'm in. So I'm feeling the strain too. But, just thinking about, using this as an opportunity to continue those conversations. And I don't know if I can say a specific, set of narratives that we're looking for, but we really just want to have a wide array of, these stories to kind of help, as Melvin was saying, how important the data is. We definitely need the data to, be present, but in order for people to really have an understanding of what the data is saying, we have to have that narrative to, kind of pull all of that together. So those things work hand in hand. And so we're, this document, this plan that we're doing kind of does give a collective narrative, if you will, just our work with the different stakeholders over this time. And we've been able to craft it in a way that pulls in the data, but also shares a very wonderful illustration of what ETOD could look like, but then also like what are the challenges that we are facing as Chicagoans that we need to develop policies around so that we can have equitable transit-oriented development. I always appreciate hearing, stories like, and Melvin, he shares his story around 95th Street far and wide. Like I've heard this story many times and I've worked with him on a couple of things in the past. And so, just hearing those stories and hearing about Emmett Street and hearing about the things that are happening in Homan Square, like these stories are so, rich to the Chicago fabric, like our fabric as a city. And we need to continue to have a space for that. And I think that the work with Elevated has allowed that. Elevated Chicago really has crafted a way to connect with communities that, I've never, as a planner, I've never really seen this level of engagement before. And so, continuing this work and continuing to kind of collect these stories as we pave the way to more equitable transit-oriented development is really exciting. I mean, I'm just super excited to see how these narratives transition from being stories of community need to stories of community wealth and community growth, and seeing, all of these different opportunities that are coming out of this work, just based off of the stories that we've heard as we put all of this together.
It sounds like Elevated Chicago has made certain that this policy will be an asset for Chicagoans and their families, and that is much appreciated. I don't think coming into 2020, any of us thought that we would be rebuilding at this time, but I after this conversation, I'm confident that we definitely are rebuilding better as a city. I mean, I think for many years, Chicago has been a beautiful tourist attraction, but listening to you all talk about, how accessible you're making the city to residents is really inspiring. And I look forward to what all we are able to learn from you all, even beyond this process. Yeah. I do want to know, though, what disparities might these new narratives combat?
I didn't hear the question clearly.
Yes, ma'am. So what disparities might these new narratives combat?
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a
let me share this. What we're always going to combat to me in our communities is the belief system, the belief that things can happen, the belief that things can change. 4 or 5 years ago, we embarked upon the restoration of the Woodson Library at 95th and Halsted. I saw that as a beacon, as a catalyst to beginning the work to revitalize the 95th Street corridor. That library had fallen into disrepair. Katanya knows this story. I mean, probably for more than a decade, it had, you know, it had the scaffolding around the building, and our community had gotten used to that. It had become part of the fabric of the community to see scaffolding around the building as if work was about to take place, right? And so, you know, we called the city up. You know, we took the city to the mat about it and said, hey, there are 2 regional libraries in this city. One's on the south side, one's on the north side. And the one on the north side don't look like this one, okay? And so we got a lot of people, and a lot of emotions came out from, you know, people have stories about that library where they grew up and did their homework and walked, and all of these things started coming up to the surface, and emotions, I mean, it just took over. So what we started really became this community-led thing. But what happened when it reopened in 2018, people saw something tangible, something that they could actually touch and feel and happen in their community. Now I'm getting calls like, hey, Melvin, you know that Aldi's right down the street has been vacant for about 3 years. We could turn that into a community. And I'm like, oh, okay, hold on now, you know. But that belief system is what you always are gonna combat. The cynicism, the skepticism of, you know, City Hall doing its own thing again. Here we go, right? But this comment period gives you a chance to dismantle that piece by piece. And that's why it's so important to participate in that, because that cynicism, you can't wipe it away in one day or with one project. It's there, it's there. And so we need to constantly be fighting against that, you know, on a daily basis. And I think, you know, step by step, you know, getting involved, you know, folks are saying vote. We all got to vote on November 3rd. Yeah, but we also got to participate in this public policy as well. So it's not just one thing, it's a combination of things so that that cynicism can start to dissipate and we start seeing the things that we need in our community.
You know, Melvin, you call out something that is coupled with data, and that's evidence, you know, and people really looking for what it is that we're talking about and what is the result thereafter, you know. You also made mention of belief. And I think from what we've seen throughout the city this year alone is that Chicagoans believe that they deserve better. And I wholeheartedly, you know, as a South Shore resident, I wholeheartedly agree. And I just have to say, I'm very proud of you all for sticking to this, because certainly you didn't know when you started this process. I think you said 3 years ago, you didn't know that it was going to come to this. So here we are, and it looks as though you have prepared a way that has allowed folks to find where they fit, and you're inviting through this comment period for people to engage in this process. So once the comment period is over, what are the next steps?
Yeah, so next steps, you know, we are going to take these comments and we're going to, you know, do our analysis and, you know, kind of really synthesize those so that we can prepare to make any edits or adjustments to the plan document before it is finalized. And so we're looking to do that over the next couple of months and, you know, definitely have the plan ready to go before the end of the year. And so after that, we want to continue this engagement process, and we want to think about implementation. We are, you know, thinking about pilot projects, you know, thinking about stations where we can consider, you know, maybe there is some type of, you know, a vacant space that we can use to help us to start imagining what ETOD could look like in communities that have not had any ETOD. And so, you know, just kind of piggybacking off of Melvin and, the work that he's been doing down on 95th Street, there, we've looked at 95th Street, that corridor between the station and the library. And, there's a lot of potential there. And so that potential exists in so many different communities across the city. And so we want to, start really thinking about that and thinking about not just us as the city, but together as a city, with our residents and really being intentional about how we can, think together, have a group think on what that could look like. But again, starting right now, there is an opportunity for folks to contribute and be part of this process. And, I really strongly encourage you to make sure that you check out the website. The plan will be open for public comment through October 29th. So we would love to hear from you. And we want you to make sure that you follow us on social media, because as we get more updates around things, we'll be posting it there. And I think I mentioned earlier that the plan is available in English and 5 other languages, the top 5 languages in the city of Chicago. So we want to make sure that, we get in touch with as many Chicagoans as possible. So just please participate, share, and, feel free to drop your comments at our email address and our phone number, and as well on the social media channels.
Thank you, Katanya. Listen, each of you, I know you are sitting at home. You've taken the time out this evening to have this conversation with us, but I just see your invisible policy and planning capes around you. So I thank you all for being superheroes, and seriously, for being superheroes in our city. The work that you do is going to make such a difference. It's already made a difference in the lives of Chicagoans, but in so many more Chicagoans' lives. Ms. Yvonne, where can people find out more about your work with the Foundation for Homan Square? Well,
you can, good question. I try and keep under the radar. As I say, we partnered with Elevated. So somewhere out there is information on the Blue Line, Homan Kedzie, and the work that the foundation is doing. Like I say, we're trying to build that corridor, and the same thing that Melvin is saying, probably about 5 blocks from the transit site is a new library, is a library that the people in the community fought to get renovated. So it's all on that Homan corridor, and it's just ripe for development.
Okay, beautiful. And then Gary, where can folks find out more about Logan Square Neighborhood Association?
So what we do usually is we keep our social medias updated at LSNA, or Logan Square Neighborhood Association, so you can always find out. We don't always do it's not always about organizing, but sometimes you can also get other information, such as like where we can get food or other kinds of resources. So you can find us at our social medias at LSNA.
Okay. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Melvin, where can folks find out more about Endeleo?
Probably call Elevated Chicago. No, I'm just kidding. If you go to our website, endeleoinstitute.org, you can find out a lot about what we're doing. Our corridor plan from CMAP is there, and a lot of other information. But yeah, you can't go wrong if you reach out to Elevated Chicago and reach out to us. But that's the best way.
Now, if it's not too much trouble, Ms. Yvonne, I know you fly under the radar, and some superheroes do that. I get that. But if you all would not, if you would oblige us with a screenshot and just look at your camera, wave at the people, and we'll capture a screenshot for social media. All right? Ready? All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us this evening for a discussion around ETOD. I'm Jamira Alexander, the President and Executive Director of Public Narrative, and together we are Public Narrative. Good night.
Thank you.